Welcome to the Humanity Mosaic Podcast, exploring authenticity and connection with Dr. E. Thank you for joining us today as we explore issues that affect our relationships in today's world. And now welcome to today's episode with Dr. E.
Hello, everyone, and I'm so happy that you're here with me today because I have the most amazing guest who's come here to speak with me today and to speak with all of you, and I love her. So whenever I have a guest on who just, is in my heart, the way that Simone Heng is in my heart, this is going to be an episode that you will absolutely adore. I'm going to read her bio because this is not something where I want to wing it. This young woman is amazing. And the work that she's doing in the world is just making such a huge contribution, bringing light to something that people don't really want to talk about, and that's loneliness. So let me tell you a little bit about Simone. Simone Heng is a human connection specialist. Have you ever even heard of that? A human connection specialist. And she's an award-winning author. That's how I happened to meet Simone. We're both Hay House authors, and we met each other, and it was love at first sight. And it's continued from that day on. Her mission is to inspire people to connect in a world thirsty for connection. And I don't think that there's been a time, at least not in my lifetime, where I have seen more of a hunger and thirst for connection. We really need that now, and it's so important. She has spoken to thousands for organizations like Harvard University, Google, Meta, Amazon, ByteDance, Lucasfilm, the United Nations, and many more. Simone and her work have been featured on CNN and Al Jazeera, and in Forbes, Harvard Business Review, BBC Radio, and many others. Simone is based and was born in Singapore, which I hope to visit very soon, and was raised in Australia and worked in the United Arab Emirates. Her book, Let's Talk About Loneliness, has been recognized with 6 international accolades, and including the 2024 Silver Nautilus Book Award in the social change and social justice category. Simone also sits on the advisory board for the Foundation for Social Connection in the United States. Please welcome my fabulous, beautiful, phenomenal guest, Simone Heng. Hi, Simone.
Oh my, you are going to make me cry. That was so mindfully delivered. Thank you, Dr. E.
Well, sometimes you meet people in the world and it's just a momentary meeting. And you recognize, wow, that was an amazing person. I enjoyed speaking with them. But then there are those moments in time when people like you and me meet, and we know this is a lifelong connection because we are so connected, not just in the head space, but also in the heart space. And we both care about what contribution we can make out in the world, particularly in a world where people are hurting. And I would say, Simone, that loneliness is one of those silent stealers of it's a silent thief of your life. It's something that can creep in there and not allow you to live as fully as you were intended to live. And you have shed so much light on that. And what I want to know from you, I want to know so many things, but I want to start with, I have a theory about how if you've experienced different cultures, if you've traveled, if you've been to different places in your life, then you do have a depth of understanding that we are all connected and that we have very similar experiences, even though we don't always give voice to that. When I think about how you grew up, Singapore, Australia, Switzerland, the UAE, all these places that you've traveled and that you've lived and that you've studied, how did you bring all of this work together, looking at the experiences that you've had with different cultures? How did you find that common thread? What was the aha moment for you?
I think I had started to feel that no matter what country I ran to, this silent thief continued to be there. And I wish it was like an aha, amazing moment, but I just think the pain became untenable and sent me to therapy. And once we started to unpack that, the through line basically through most of my life, and I'm not alone in this, which is wonderful, but I didn't know that at the time, was this yearning and thirst for connection. Firstly, within my family system, filial system, which is actually really common for immigrants, in Asian immigrants in Western countries, immigrants full stop in countries within which they don't feel they fully belong. So you feel a lack of belonging, which is an impetus for loneliness to begin. But then within my own four walls of the family home, I didn't feel fully safe because there was a lot of trauma going on there as well. And so that was probably the first step. And then as I moved throughout the other countries, I would find love and belonging temporarily, but for me, it always felt kind of fleeting. And when I entered the entertainment industry, prior to the work that I do now, that was really augmented because the entertainment industry was a replica of my childhood home, this kind of dynamic of you're never fully good enough, you're never skinny enough, you're never pretty enough, you're never smart enough, you're never talented enough. And those feelings are very, very isolating. The hilariousness of now not being in media is that you realize that everybody was feeling that level of not good enough at the same time. And had we just spoken to each other and been vulnerable, we would have all felt as women less alone, but we were too busy being pitted against each other to even have that conversation. So I think if I look at all of those different markets I lived in, and all of those different environments, that it just, that feeling when you're a highly sensitive person, those feelings of not belonging are so augmented. It's a very small skip to loneliness. It's it's within a very short amount of time, the loneliness starts to kind of seep in.
Yeah, I have experienced exactly what you're describing, and particularly as a woman of color, trying to be who I needed to be wherever I was so that I could be accepted, so that I could belong. And it took me more than a minute to realize that other people don't get to tell me whether or not I belong, And, I think you shed a lot of light on that. Can you speak to that a little bit about how we cannot depend on others to make the choice that we do or do not belong in any particular space, particularly as women?
I can't believe you just said that, because I was in the shower where all good thoughts happen. And I was actually thinking the other day how a lot of my expatriate friends, some of them are quite a large number, are like 3 of them are moving out of Singapore. And I keep my circle very tight. So 3 is a big number when you know how to create intimate, good, deep connection. And I was thinking, where do I go now to make new friends? And I realized that as a mixed race person, I sit between worlds. I'm not fully an expatriate because I have a long ancestral history with Singapore, but Singaporeans, because I've been raised internationally, might not necessarily feel I'm fully one of them. And for the first time as a 41-year-old this year, instead of feeling bad that I live between worlds, I was like, how amazing. You can go and find friendships that are friends with your cousins and local people. You can also go and attend some expat events, which I'm going to, and you get the choice, the privilege of moving between those worlds. And it was probably the first time that I looked at it as a privilege versus what a lot of mixed race kids go through, or people who live between communities.
Correct.
Where they feel I don't fully belong to either. And now at this age of adulthood, I feel like it's a privilege. So I guess if we flipped this sense of I don't belong, I feel different, because difference very quickly can lead to loneliness. You feel no one understands you, right? If you can flip the differences that you have and see if they're actually forms of privilege to move between communities, man, that's a big shift. That's from I'm the victim and I don't belong to, oh my God, I can go to the Arab world. I can go to Switzerland and speak German with all my friends. I can go to Australia and be with my girlfriends there. That's a privilege.
It truly is. And I have to say that it's interesting how even on opposite sides of the world, you and I have had such similar experiences. And, both of us, in terms of our appearance, might be a little bit ethnically ambiguous. Yeah, people don't know necessarily exactly what you are or exactly what I am. And not using that as something that you would abuse, but actually embracing the reality of what you just stated, being able to explore different cultures, different customs, different ways of being in the world, and not actually putting yourself in a little corner and making yourself small and feeling like I don't belong anywhere. Actually, we all belong everywhere. We belong everywhere because of that universal connection that we share. But we haven't been taught that that is actually a privilege, a gift, an honor, an amazing experience that we can have in life if, in fact, we just shift our gaze a little bit and we view it differently. And I think that you speak so well about how it's not the victim mentality, but rather it is a gift. It is a privilege, and it is an honor to be able to move through the world in that way. Was there a defining moment or a personal experience, something that happened to you that actually sparked your wanting to study human connection deeper? Was there something that you know how that little personal, not the aha, but something personal that made you take the deeper dive, not just for yourself, but also for the world because of the work that you're now doing?
So 3 things happened all at once. It was the universe punching you in the face the 3rd time if you ignore the first 2 taps, right? So the most profound thing was my mother has a very, very rare degenerative disease, and it's characterized by very early pre-onset dementia. We're talking 50s, 60s. Girl in Scotland has been found 18 years of age with this condition, experiencing memory loss, blackouts. And so my mum, around 2018, 2017, was having issues connecting with herself. That's actually the topic of my next book, which we'll talk about later. But she could not remember defining formative memories, which of course comprises our identity. She started to forget that my dad had passed away back in 2004. And this for me was heartbreaking. It's probably secondary only to if she were to forget who I was, but to see her as someone who was so strong, so embodied, not being able to connect with herself. So that was number 1. And then I was working in my tail end of my media career, and I could see how our creative output, so this is in terms of how organizations or creative people are affected by loneliness, how all of us staying siloed with our own feelings of dissatisfaction, our own issues, competing, not being vulnerable, was building a toxic work environment in which we were creating the worst content that I had produced in my entire media career, having worked around the world. So I was seeing that people who could not connect with themselves could not create content that connects with others because they were so lost within, they couldn't even imagine what would resonate with an audience. So that was the corporate side of it that I could see. I was like, if we're a tiny radio station experiencing this, this is the beginning of something much bigger. And then one night I was on air and I was running a competition to give away superhero movie tickets. And I asked people to voice note into the station, if you could have one superpower in the whole world, what would it be and why? And a Gen Z girl sent a voice note in and she said, oh my God, I'll never forget this. She said, I know it might not sound like much. And she was so insecure as she was saying it, so ashamed. She said, but I would really, really like to know how to connect with people one-on-one, you know, really profoundly. I feel like everyone seems so distracted nowadays. And that was the final aha. I was like, so there is a futurist problem now. So this is back in 2018. We did not have the data yet, like we now have Jonathan Haidt's book on the anxious generation. We knew social media was doing something, but we didn't have the data. And so these three things together, I was like, on a personal level, on a workplace level, on a future level, there is something going on here. And then I hit all the research studies, and I had a wonderful incubator called a pandemic to study as if it was a second university degree. My university degree is on communications and cultural studies anyway, so it's very related. But these were the latest things coming out. And now I'm happy to say I sit on a board with the academics who wrote these studies. Like, it's absolutely wild. So that's really the gestation story for how all of this started, and it never ends. Like, now my body of work going forward is really around how lonely people are being targeted by these AI companion apps coming out of Silicon Valley. So if you are a healthily connected person, you understand social health, you have friends, and an AI companion app to be your boyfriend or girlfriend comes along, you can probably use it in a healthy way with boundaries and you can pop out. Now, someone who is lonely, their brain, the nature of how their brain is wired has literally changed. So they become prime petri dishes for addiction to these particular AI companion apps, and probably will not go out and connect with other people. Something like an AI companion gets their hooks in. And so that's my next body of work that I'm obsessed with.
Well, that is a wonderful body of work to be obsessed with, because moving forward, we are already seeing that the younger generation coming along right now, there are some definite differences in the way that connection is formed and whether or not connection is real. So it seems like it can be very surface level, but it doesn't go very deep at all. And I can tell you, just from my years as a therapist and a college professor, before people were sitting next to each other and texting one another, they had to actually talk to each other and form a connection or not, decide whether or not they were compatible or they were going to be good friends or not. But now it's an entirely different world. And it's sort of a strange new world because we don't have the answers yet. But
I just have to highlight something you said there, which is so profound. We had to filter ourselves, and we had to have difficult conversations whether we wanted to continue or not. Now, one of the huge issues with a generation that has been completely immersed in this technology since birth is the frictionlessness with which they can just block, not reply. And that has led to issues once they're entering now the workforce in terms of having difficult conversations. Because if
Yes.
you never had to have a difficult conversation, you just didn't want to see someone again. You don't learn that social agility or those problem-solving skills. The other part of it is the ambiguous loss. Esther Perel talks about this, of even our older generation, couples sitting in their house where they used to be having this conversation. It's like your spouse is there, but they're not really there. So we are suffering the same ambiguous loss that I experienced with my mother as she's in and out of lucidity, and I'm
Right.
grieving her drop by drop. People are experiencing that in their marriages now because they don't have boundaries around technology, and they're losing the presence of their husband or their wife. Now I'm getting real agitata, but having boundaries on this use. Dr. E, you see me, I'm very active on socials. But I write in my book, they're a huge, I rarely scroll. I apologize to all the people I love in my life if you're not getting comments and likes about me, but I pop in and I post and I get out, because I wouldn't finish writing a book or be there for my mum properly if I was scrolling. I would lose hours, days of my life. And I've dealt with too much death in my life to want to get to my deathbed and go, I lost years scrolling when I could have been present with people.
Absolutely. Simone, my husband, you two met, and he loves you as well. When's she coming to visit? I said, soon.
Love
But
him.
the interesting thing, now we've been together 44 years, and so many people have requested that we do like a master class on marriage and making love last, and how do you thrive through the different transitions and stages of marriage. And actually we're going to do it because of the exact thing that you just identified. I cannot tell you how many times we've gone out to dinner and we'll look at each other, because we'll look over at a couple at the table next to us and they're both on their phones, or they're eating their meal, but they don't have a word to say to one another. And it's just, people are losing their social skills, their ability to socialize and connect. And that affects your capacity for love. That affects your capacity for what you're going to put out in the world. And that just is heartbreaking to me. And so I looked at him the other day, and he's always said, you never put your own marriage out there on display because that people want to take pot shots at you. And I said, we don't want to do that. But what we do want to do is help people to come back to connection. There's nothing lonelier than living with someone that you love and you're still lonely.
Oh,
lonely.
That I have experienced that. It was before I started this work, and I would much rather be on my own till I find the quality of what you and your husband have. Because people also need to know there's a very big difference between solitude and loneliness. Solitude is a state of aloneness that we choose, and we have a choice in that. Loneliness is a state of aloneness within which we feel we have no choice. We are being subjected to it. And although I speak on this work, I have a very healthy level of solitude. I travel the world on my own and I love it, but I will only make space for the relationship in which there is that quality level of connection, having experienced the sheer pain of being with someone that you felt was absent within that connection. It's a horrible feeling.
So how do you go about making choices in terms of your relationships, your connections? What are some of the deal breakers for you? And what are the things that you look for because you know that this is going to feed your spirit and give you life? What are some of those things that are within you?
I'm actually just going to record a little video on this today. So we're very in sync, Dr. E. So one of my favorite quotes that was shared with me from the leading academic in the human connection field, and she just researched that. She embodies it. She said her dad used to have this saying in the house: everybody's name is safe in our household. And by that, he meant we do not talk about other people. So a deal breaker for me is if people are trying to bond with me about talking about other people or gossiping. I have had my fill of that in the entertainment industry, also in the kind of ethnic immigrant circles I grew up in. There was a lot of aunties. That was a lot of their way maybe of sharing information or feeling safer as a minority in a country. That's how they bonded. But for me, that is a big red flag. If people sit around and spend their time talking about other people, you're not my kind of people. And I stopped the gossip practice 2017, 2018, my life completely changed. So that's my number one. I'm not interested in being in like ladies who sip and want to talk about others. My preference is for people who want to sit and talk about building things. How are we going to serve people? What are we going to create in this world? How can I help you do what you need to do? If you follow me online, I'm a massive sharer of any girl's got a book you want me to share. I have felt so much connection when I started my business because we're in the personal development field. The biggest difference for me between that and my previous line of work was the ability to share. So I look for sharers and I share first. And then I wait to see if there's some reciprocity in that sharing. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. It's a wonderful indicator of which way on the path to go. And I think the last one is I shy away from complainers. I recently went on a date. Oh, you're getting the tea now. Nobody ever hears about my dating life, Dr. E. This is just for you. So it was a mutual setup between friends. So I thought, oh, well, we should have some commonality. The guy just did. So I always like to listen first. And I do that because a lot of people are lonely in this world because they feel they're not heard. So whether it's a date with a new BFF or a date with a potential BF, I always try and listen first and then work out the territory and make that person feel seen and heard. But this person just wanted to monologue about like, oh, the snow in Europe is not very good this time of year. I don't want to go. And, you know, the Negroni at this bar is not very good. Like it was just like the monologue of first world complaints. And I was just like, yeah, this is not your person. So I listen first and then listen to the quality of what's coming out. And that's a wonderful indicator to decide to filter. I'm not into complainers.
Yeah. I often say that people who spend so much time complaining, they actually are very draining. And complaining is it has an energy that is contagious and it's negative, and it can absolutely suck all the oxygen and air out of the room. So yeah, that's a good one to pay attention to. Now, I of course have no idea how you are still single, and
I'm working with a coach at the moment to find out that exact answer. But I just do want to share a quote on the complaining. A friend once told me, every time you complain about something, you relive it by 20%. By that, all that agitation, all that bile that just comes up and repeats again, every time you tell that negative story about how somebody did you wrong or this or that. So, you know, even with my speeches, I do tell stories of, you know, losing my dad, my mum's condition, but I always make sure there's an inspirational tilt, not just for the audience, but for me, so that the universe doesn't think that I'm repeating this and calling these negative things back into action. So there's a really big distinction there. If you're just complaining and that story doesn't serve anyone, you're just calling that back in. Similar back in.
I love that you're saying this, because as a therapist, I used to say to some of my clients, I would say, that's the fourth time you've told me that story. Now, is there going to be a shift here, or are we going to lose this story? Is it serving you? What purpose is it really serving? And of course, the it can serve a purpose when it is inspirational, when you are sharing a story of triumph, of victory over, of how you managed to go from here to here successfully, and you had some bumps along the way. But that's a story of victory. That's a story of triumph. That's not just complaining. And so many people don't see the difference. But I want to go back to something else that you said, because it's a real passion of mine, and it's a huge mission of mine right now. And it's the whole challenge that we have of really bringing women together, of bringing women together to support one another, to love one another, to help each other when the loneliness thief comes in there and tries to steal someone's life. And most importantly, when you talked about a deal breaker for you, which is also a deal breaker for me, just sitting around and gossiping and tearing another woman down. Now, I don't believe in tearing anyone down because it serves no purpose. But what advice, what inspirational words come to you if you're making an appeal to women for us to become more united, to stand together and support and love and care for each other the way that we can and should, if we're actually going to elevate the consciousness of this world that we live in?
I have had so many incidences, and I've always come back to, because I knew who I used to be when I was asleep, right? And the question of self-connection. So you have to ask yourself, when you are about to open your mouth to say something about someone you might barely know, you don't know their story, but something about that woman triggers something in you. And that little feeling of envy or jealousy that is going to be the seed with which you start gossiping, you need to ask yourself, why do I want to open my mouth and talk about this person? What is happening here? Now, those of us who know manifestation understand that that woman turning that jealousy or that envy into a powerful expander. She's doing something that I want. I understand. That's what I'm feeling. That will probably stop you from participating, but very few times do people take that breath before they open their mouth. And of course, I'm a professional speaker, so I think about this all the time. It's like, I'm responsible for what I say and how it lands. That's a big responsibility. I'm about to entertain or sit around people gossiping about someone. And what is the reason I might want to partake in that? Is there something about that woman that actually I could learn from? So really, this is about me. It starts with the individual, and only until you can wake up to what is happening within you. I have been on the receiving end of, I'm very triggering for women. I understand that, I'm neurodivergent. I used to be a model like you, Dr. E. Like, I understand there's a whole bunch of stuff about me that if another one wasn't in a great place or hadn't had that awakening, but I'm okay. The women who love women follow me and we love on each other. That's fine. But I do think if I look at my former self and the times when I partook in that behavior, it's because I didn't take that moment to connect to self and ask, why do you need to soothe yourself with this gossip right now? What's happening in you that is compelling you to be part of this behavior? And I think if we start at that individual level, you'd have a lot more people saying no to sitting around and talking about others.
Right. And if we speak up when we see it happening around us, I absolutely love to be in an environment where once it begins, I can be the person to say, stop, just stop. We are all better than this. We're better than this. And if we're not feeling better than this at this moment, then let's work on it, because pulling another woman down, particularly if she's not here to discuss whatever it is you have to say about her, is not something that we want to do. It's not
No.
going to move us forward. It's really not. And being that voice, and that's something I want to share with anyone that's listening today, instead of being the person who starts the gossip, be the person that stops the gossip. Whatever it is, it cannot be that juicy that you just really need to know that, because it's going to do something good for your life. No, just be the person that shuts it down. And that's so important. It's such an important to learn. And the younger you are as a woman and you learn this, the better your life will be, because you won't grow into being a petty human. You grow into being a kind human, a caring human, a compassionate and a loving human,
and a sharing human. It's just change. It expands your heart, because here's the thing, there's always going to be someone younger, prettier, thinner, smarter, whatever. Why even play that game? That is a losing game. Do you know it's a winning game? I share openly, whether it's reciprocated or not, that doesn't matter. I give with an open heart, expecting nothing in return. And I love to see people win. I love seeing people win. And I think for a lot of people, unfortunately for human nature, and particularly the world we're living in, and we can even see this from our top global leaders and how that kind of sentiment is filtering down of like, I can't win if you win. That is just a fallacy. That is just a fallacy, because what each individual person wants is so vastly different. It's not apples and apples we're comparing or competing against. Oh my gosh, I could go on about this for years and years and years, but I think it's probably the most life-changing thing that I did when I reparented myself.
Right there. Reparented yourself. Give a few words of advice and inspiration about reparenting yourself.
So firstly, when you are going and you have your awakening, you start seeing a therapist like what Dr. E used to do, and you are reparenting yourself, I want you to understand you're going to have lots of backslides. And this is a whole chapter in my next book, literally about backslides in the states of change. Just like people trying to stop smoking, you have been hardwired to relate to other people in a certain way based off what was mirrored to you by your primary caregiver. You are programmed to maybe see the world as a threat if you grew up in an environment where you didn't feel psychologically safe. So all these things are part of your wiring, and then you are bringing this into the adult world and interacting with everyone based on these historic, sometimes ancestral ways of being. And so please be compassionate with yourself along the journey of doing the work and the hard work, not reading Instagram tiles and thinking you can tap out and say, like the hard confrontational work of relearning, doing your CBT, doing whatever the therapist or counselor helps you to do. And I want you to be, some of my biggest moments of shame was in the process of doing this reparenting, where I would backslide to old behaviors and then I would beat myself up about it. And I would just say that they are normal. What's important is that you continue to move forward.
Right. It's interesting because what people do not understand is that your default behaviors and your default thinking is strong. And so, we return to the default. We return to what we know. But to quote Maya Angelou, when we know better, we do better. And what's important is to always strive for knowing better so that we can do better, and being kind and loving to ourselves. It's just, it's one of the things about you that is so beautiful that you put out in the world. It is very obvious that you care about the world but your caring about the world came through I would say, a journey of learning how to know and love yourself. And at the end of the journey, and the journey never ends because there's no destination, we just keep going. But as I have even watched you just just grow and glow, and just to be such a beacon of light and love in this world, when so many people couldn't give voice to what they were feeling. And you did. You did that for yourself and for everyone out there who was feeling the same way, but they didn't have the words, they didn't have the vehicle, they didn't have even a way to be able to begin to express what you expressed. You, my darling friend, are such a gift to this world. And I am just so honored to know you and to love you, and to be able to watch all the amazing things that you're going to continue to do. Before we sign off, I want you to tell everyone what's next. What's coming now?
Firstly, before that, I just want to reflect back to you, Dr. E, that when I met you, the word that shouted out to me was wisdom. And I am so inspired by your mentorship, but just by your wisdom and the respect that you command quietly, not by shouting out, not by being super quietly grounded. And if you get the chance to meet Dr. E in person, you'll feel it. You'll just feel that quiet confidence. Nothing needs to be overstated. And I very much hope that I can have that quality one day myself. So as for what is next, we are high on the tail of the second book. I hand in the final draft at the end of next month, and then it'll be published 28th of April, 2026. It is all about a lot of the things that Dr. E and I talked today. It's about the power of self-connection. I do have the title, but I don't know if I've got permission to share it yet. But it is all about how our lives, our thriving would be aided if we had a more comprehensive relationship with ourselves. Things like, would people be going to war if they had a relationship with themselves that was really connected? Would we stay in those bad jobs like I did, bad industries bad for me, Would we stay with the partner that wasn't treating us well if we had that real knowing and connection with ourselves? So that is the next book that I'm so excited for. But of course, let's talk about loneliness. If that is a topic that you've come here for, and you really want a way to feel more connected while learning about the topic, the book is packed full of almost part memoir at the same time as feeding you some of the science, and the science will make you feel less alone once you realize how broad and widespread the problem of loneliness actually is.
The science is amazing. The book is amazing. But what comes through the pages of that book is the love. It truly does. And every person who has ever felt lonely, and that deep loneliness, not lonely for a day or just a moment, but that deep loneliness that follows you around, this book is a soothing balm for that particular condition. And I'm so glad you wrote it. And I can't wait for the next one. So as I'm signing off, and I hate to sign off from you because I could just hang out with you all day, but we'll do that afterwards. We'll plan our dates to get together. But once again, the amazing Simone Heng, and let's talk about loneliness. Yes, let's look at loneliness. And I want to say to all of you who are listening to this, it's not just about your loneliness. It's also about the loneliness of the people around you. And so it is a condition that is not uncommon in the world that we're living in today. So when you're feeling lonely, reach out and connect with someone else. And remember that connection is actually a cure, but it has to be real connection, not superficial. We can all do a much better job of working on deepening our connections, and we do that by learning how to love ourselves and love others. Thank you, Simone, for being with me tonight.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Humanity Mosaic Podcast with Dr. E. For more information, please visit DeborahEgerton.com and be sure to check out theAuthenticSelfCommunity.com to continue your